All right, we're back. And in this segment, we're going to talk about Eysenck's Big Three. So, Eysenck is not very different from Big Five in the sense that he thinks that these traits are innate. He specifically attributes these traits that he identifies as being a function of the three underlying biological systems that he has pointed to that we talked about in the biology section, but we'll reiterate a little bit. So, just to remind you, Eysenck's model says that there are two main dimensions of personality: the introversion extroversion dimension, and then the stable unstable dimension. We could call the stable unstable dimension neuroticism. And we could call the introverted extroverted dimension extroversion. So far we're sounding like Big Five, right? We've got two of the five that the Big Five has. And then Eysenck's third one he called psychoticism, which is your tendency towards psychopathology. A lot of the words that Eysenck used, neuroticism, psychoticism, are awfully close to words that Freud would have used. And so a lot of modern people don't really like to use these words because it sounds a little more disordered than he probably meant, especially the neuroticism word. He didn't really mean it as disordered. He just meant it as, this trait. Psychoticism, he did mean more disordered, tendency towards psychopathology. I was just sitting in on a master's thesis defense where the person used psychopathology as a term for people who might have symptoms of like depression or anxiety. And one member of the committee who's not in psychology was saying, well, I don't like the word psychopathology. It makes it sound like it's the person's fault or that they have something dreaded wrong with them. But the word psychopathology literally means just something, a variation away from the norm in a negative way in your psychological functioning. It doesn't mean that you've lost touch with reality or any of those things. That's not what psychopathology means. And it definitely does not mean that you are a psychopath. The word psychopath is not very commonly used in psychology, believe it or not. That's much more of a legal realm term, psychopath. We typically use the word either sociopath, or we use the phrase, the diagnostic term, antisocial personality disorder, which is, a mouthful. But psychopathology would never be truncated down and shortened and into psychopath. Like those are not synonyms. That doesn't go together. So I just wanted to clarify that, because if a person with a PhD in a field that's adjacent to psychology thought that psychopathology meant you're one step off from psychopath, it's possible that people who are taking an introduction to personality theory might make the same mistake. Those are not synonyms at all. So Eysenck agreed with Big Five about two of the dimensions. Added this third. In psychoticism, he said really wasn't a trait in the way that neuroticism and extroversion are. He kind of made it sound like it was a little spicy variation, like almost it was a good thing to have, this degree of psychopathology tendency, which means it's going to be a continuum, and it's going to be, very little tendency towards psychopathology all the way up to, already displaying symptoms of psychopathology. So he added that third one in. That's a little bit, some people don't like it. I'll be frank. Eysenck's not here to defend himself, but a lot of people don't like that aspect of his theory. Now, since I'm picking on Eysenck, I'll say what people who really like Eysenck's theory say about the Big Five, which is that the Big Five might just be pulling out subparts of neuroticism and extroversion and calling them new traits. Like, for example, the Big Five has conscientiousness. Well, if you notice in the dimensions here that Eysenck made, you'll see, for example, right here on the top right quadrant, in the unstable extroverted category, you have impulsive, you have changeable, excitable. Eysenck argued you've just pulled out some of the components of an unstable extroverted personality and called it something new. Right? And then the opposite, if you go to the bottom left, you see the opposites of the excitable, changeable, impulsive, and you see controlled, reliable, peaceful. And so he's saying there's that continuum that you made that I think is part of these two traits. So there's a debate about whether you need only 2 dimensions of personality to fully explain personality, or you really need the 5. And we are not going to settle that debate in this class. I will point out, though, like I said in the chapter on biology, that again, Eysenck developed this model using factor analysis and by going to lots and lots and lots of cultures all around the world. Big Five, when they developed it, only used American data sets, and then it's been replicated in other cultures, and they have also found 5 traits, but it's a little bit different than the way that Eysenck went all around the world and then let the factor analysis based on data from all different kinds of cultures show objectively which traits would emerge. So it's possible that, the replications are confirming the Big Five, but not because those 5 traits are really meaningful in every culture, but because if it's on the scale and this is how it's scored, this is what you'll see. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Eysenck only found 2 when he was letting the data drive the development of the scale. So something to consider. I'm just giving you all the arguments. You can consider it however you want. Now, let's talk for a second about motives as being maybe sort of these individual differences that might be kind of, you could characterize them as traits. Motives are internal psychobiological forces that help induce particular behavior patterns. Okay, I didn't write that definition, but it's so, I can fit it on a slide pretty easily because the people who wrote this definition, worked on it till it took fewer words. Internal psychobiological forces is the key term here. These motives are things that are inside you. They can be purely psychological, or they could be purely biological that will motivate you to behave in certain ways. So biological might be your stomach's growling, right? So you are motivated to find something to eat. Psychological might be you're bored, so you're motivated to find something more interesting to do. So just a couple of examples, right? Now there are needs, there are life tasks, and there are personal strivings that people who study motives have identified. So needs would be things like the need for food, water, sex, excitement, these kinds of things. Life tasks would be things that you're motivated to do because it's part of your sense of what it means to be you, or a person like you, or a human, or however we want to construe it, right? So life tasks are the things that you are motivated to do because you feel like it's the things that's supposed to be part of your life. And then there are the personal strivings that are the things that you are motivated to do idiosyncratically because these are the things that you want to do, the pursuits that you're willing to undertake and persevere with, and those kinds of things. So you're motivated for your own personal reasons. So having set that up, let's talk about what Henry Murray said about motivation. He generated a list of psychogenic needs that are different things. I don't know how else to say it. They're motivated by different things. So this first one it's a list of needs that are associated with inanimate objects. So acquisition, right? This need, I have to have it. I need that car. I need that purse. I need that new phone. That would be the need for acquisition. Conservancy. Okay, I already have it. I don't want to lose it. I don't want it to get broken. I don't want it dented. The need for order. I need all the stuff that I have to be organized in such a fashion that it's easy to find, or it looks nice, or it stays clean, or whatever. Retention is some things need to be sort of consumed, but if you have a need for retention, you might not want to consume those things. Like, there are people who are still, it's April of 2022, there are people who are still stockpiling toilet paper, right? There was a moment when toilet paper looked like it was at risk, and so people started retaining toilet paper. That would be an example of retention, where you're keeping stuff that normally gets consumed and then replenished and consumed and replenished, and instead you're like, no, I'm going to kind of hoard this. And then the need for construction, to use inanimate objects to build something. The needs reflecting ambition, power, accomplishment, and prestige include the need for superiority, the need for achievement. These seem to me more on the face already definable, like these are words that you already know, as opposed to the ones on the inanimate objects that needed some explanation. the need for recognition, the need for exhibition, to perform in front of other people. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be, flashing your genitals to an unsuspecting person, which is how we define that in human sexuality. Need for exhibition in this case is your need to sort of, show off or have other people see what you're doing or eating or wearing. Or I think we have a really powerful support for the need for exhibition these days called, TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that, where everybody can exhibit everything, right? Avoidance is the need for, avoiding any kind of harm to, to your own sense of self or feelings of accomplishment and power, like avoiding information that would tell you that you aren't all the things that you want to think you are. And then finally, we have the needs connected with human power. So dominance. Deference is where it's like the opposite of being dominant, sort of like deferring to other people's power, right? Similance is trying to associate yourself with someone who has power. See, we're alike, we're similar, right? The need for autonomy, the need to have control over your own self, right? Not have other people governing you and telling you what to do. And then contrariness, that's the tendency to want to say no or just do the opposite because you're being told you should do something and you're like, I don't want to, I'm just going to do the opposite. So contrariness. All right. Now, the way we would measure these psychogenic needs is using a test that Henry Murray developed called the Thematic Apperception test. So here's an example of a drawing that a person would have to examine in a thematic apperception test. And the job of the person who's taking the test would be to tell the administrator who these people are, what's the relationship between these people, what happened right before this picture was taken, and what's going to happen next. I picked this one because I find it fun to describe in my own thematic apperception way. So I usually like to ask my students, what do you think's going on? Who do you think these people are? But then I start pointing out, okay, so the woman, it appears, that's laying in the bed, I would like to question whether it's an actual woman, because if you look, it looks like her breasts are uncovered and it looks like she's naked. And A, you don't see any nipples on her breasts, and B, you don't see any like sagging to the side. So I'm like, is this a mannequin or a blow-up doll of some sort? Like, what are we even looking at? So I like to just question the whole, like, who these people are at a much deeper level. This probably says something about me, I'm not sure, but so your first thing you're supposed to figure out is who the people are. So I'm going to say, okay, mannequin laying in the bed. No, I'm going to say it's, a woman laying in the bed. Let's assume it's a woman. Let's assume that the woman is alive. Okay. And then we have what appears to be a man just based on style of dress, but the arm is covering the face. And honestly, we don't really know on that figure whether it's male or female. It could go either direction. With the doll, the person in the bed, I feel like it's more clearly that this is a person at least who has breasts. So it makes me feel like it's safer to say that it's probably female. So we see some books on the table. We see that it appears that we're in a bedroom. It's not like just a person who's laying on the couch. It appears to be nighttime to me, although maybe I'm wrong, because wouldn't the lamp be turned on if it was nighttime? So I'm not sure if I'm right about that. Anyway, let's say that you, upon glancing at this, say that this is a murder victim on the bed, and the killer is wiping the blood off of his face, and what's going to happen next is he's going to run away, right? Well, Murray would interpret that answer differently than if you said something like, actually, that's a man and his wife. She's sleeping in the bed because she's been sick and feverish, and I guess in modern times I might say, oh, she's suffering from COVID. In the past, I'd say flu. So she's sick and feverish, and so he's been sitting up all night trying to take care of her, and he's also simultaneously studying for the bar exam. And so he's got his books out on the table, and he's been up all night studying and taking care of his wife, and he's wiping the sleep out of his eyes because he's got to get it together and go take the bar exam today. Those two stories would elicit very different interpretations from Murray. My last interpretation would be an example of the, need for achievement, right? Like he wants to go pass his bar exam. He might look at, let's see, what could we say about the caring for his sick wife? Needs connected to, see, yeah, we really don't have nurturance here on the list, so that's probably not going to show up as one that he would identify. But maybe the need for autonomy would be illustrated by the fact that he didn't bring in like a family member or a nurse or something to take care of his wife, but he did it himself. That might be showing some need for autonomy. And what we're assessing here is not the people. We're not assessing their need for achievement. It's me. I must be displaying a need for achievement, and I must be displaying a need for autonomy, because that's how I interpreted this picture. These pictures are designed to be ambiguous, with the goal being that if the content is ambiguous and you're asked to describe what's going on, your unconscious will project itself onto this picture. And you'll feel completely comfortable doing it because it feels to you like it's inherent in the picture. So for me, it looks like completely natural to say, she's sick. He stayed up all night caring for her. The fact that he's got a tie on and books on the table makes me think he's preparing for an exam and he's going to go take it. Like, this makes perfect sense to me. How it's so obvious. How could you see it any other way? That would be my unconscious's, sort of, rationale for why this interpretation makes sense. But the truth is, I'm projecting my own needs onto this picture. So this is what we call a projective test. The unconscious projects itself onto this image. All right. So hopefully that kind of makes sense a little bit. There are more needs that Murray listed, but I just wanted to focus on the ones that kind of had to do with traits right now. Let's go ahead and stop here. In the next video, we will pick up with some different skills that could be considered traits.